The two indicators used here are children per woman, or total fertility, and HDI, which stands for Human Development Index, which includes life expectancy, education, and per capita income indicators. And the rank and the HDI goes from 0 to 1, with 1 being the highest and 0 being very low, and 0.5, which is in the middle, being also slightly lower class. And the pattern seen here is that places which have more kids or more children per woman, such as Rwanda here, tend to have lower human development ranks, a lower HDI score, while places with fewer kids tend to have a higher HDI score. The places which tend to have the highest amount of kids is Sub-Saharan Africa, though East Asia, Pacific also tend to have a low HDI, even though their children per woman isn't that high. For example, we have China here, and the child per woman is 2.3, yet the HDI score is 0.4, which is an anomaly. But generally, places with higher HDI scores tend to have fewer children per woman. So here we can watch the over time. Places like China, even though the child per woman seems to go down, and in general, child per woman everywhere is going down, as the HDI slowly increases for almost every country. And China, which was back here, is progressed, but yet you still see Europe and the Americas tend to be more developed than Sub-Saharan Africa, which is lagging behind the United States and European nations. Yeah, over time, every country seems to get more developed, though Niger is still lagging behind. Looking at certain countries more specifically, such as Switzerland and Brazil, as you can see, Switzerland throughout the whole time period, has always been very high in the HDI, and the amount of children per woman has stayed relatively consistent throughout the whole time, while Brazil, previously, back in the 1980s, had a higher amount of kids, and HDI rank was lower, but over time, as time progressed, as you can see here, the amount of children per woman decreased and the HDI rank increased, which shows a negative relationship between the two of them. And with Switzerland, Switzerland has always been relatively highly developed throughout 1980s, and this could be due to the fact that in the earlier part of the 20th century, when other European nations were involved in World War II, Switzerland stayed relatively neutral, and while those nations got torn down, Switzerland was able to internally develop and keep and sustain that level of development and keep a very high HDI. And as for Brazil, in the 90s, there was an economic shift, and that allowed for them to quickly develop throughout the 90s in the HDI rank, and eventually the amount of children per woman decreased, which this drop off in child per woman is believed to occur because the nation became more urbanized. Ultimately, places with the highest fertility tend to be the least developed countries on the Human Development Index. That's the trend observed throughout time.